Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Tabitha Service here with another video. This time I'm working on part 2 of the commission I've been working on, which is the Zhou Zishu blue hanfu. In this video I'll be working on the overcoat, which is a very long overcoat with big sleeves with all these beautiful leaf embroidering and beadwork on it. So in the next few clips, you're going to be seeing me cut out the pattern. I'm using one of my paper patterns that I bought off of Taobao. Uh, this pattern itself is mostly for a short overcoat and with shorter sleeves. So I had to take another pattern I own and use the sleeve pattern for this. So I'm like meshing two patterns together. And yes, I still have not created a pattern that combines the two together so I can stop using both at the same time. Um, a lot has been going on with the holiday season, so I haven't had the chance to put together time to make this pattern as one piece. Uh, the easiest part to make for this overcoat is the sleeves, because most of the time you can easily just fold the fabric over and cut both sleeves out at the same time. Uh, the downside about this pattern is since it's long, you need a lot more fabric because the pattern I have is for a shorter hanfu overcoat, and I need to add about 8 inches to the end, and you'll see me do that here in a bit because this pattern I think goes mid leg, or not mid leg, but right, uh, just above my ankle. Which most live action Chinese dramas, a lot of these overcoats are way longer. So I usually have to add 8 inches to get the length. Sometimes I overestimate, but I rather overestimate so that I can make sure I do a nice hem at the bottom, or a rolled hem if I wanted to do a rolled hem to, give myself enough space. The person I'm making this commission for is about 4 inches taller than me. So I added an extra inch so that I can do a nice hem at the base of the overcoat. And you can see me here laying the two outfits on top, two patterns on top of each other. Uh, Usually I would recommend having enough space to do this, but I still live in an apartment. There's not a lot of space, uh, and I also have to deal with my cats. Now, here, um, I sadly did not take any video of me using my embroidering machine, which I just bought recently, to embroider the leaf work onto the sleeves, but I embroidered both sleeves, and then I attached them to the main base of the overcoat. If you want to know how I did the embroidering, my friend in the Netherlands helped uh, digitalize the program because I do not have a digitalizer. I could only afford to get the embroidering machine. Once I had the sleeves attached, I was able to pin up the bottom of the sleeve down to the side. Looking at video, I believe there is a slit down the side, so I left a slit down the side of this overcoat, and I kind of had to guess where the slit started because there's not a lot of good images from the side of this costume. A lot of the screenshots that I got were kind of blurry, so it wasn't much help. Uh, but once I lay it down, um, like I said, you need a lot of space for these overcoat hanfu because sometimes they don't lay on it. You can see me cutting here. Uh, I think some of the fabric stretched while I was embroidering it, so it warped the fabric, but that's fine. The embroidering does not go all the way to the edge of the sleeve because I have to hem the sleeve with a wide hem. So I made sure to estimate where the hem would end, and you can see me just making sure everything looks good on the edges. Because once the side seam is sewn and serged, uh, I'm gonna hem those sleeves, and I just want to make sure it looks good and everything fits perfectly. So the next thing I worked on is ironing on the interfacing to the collar of the overcoat. Um, I used the lightest weight interfacing that you can buy at your local Joann's or craft store. At Joann's, I think, I don't know exactly which one, so I'm going to put it down in the description below. But it's just the lightest weight interfacing. It's very like tissue paper thin. Because I don't want the collars to be too thick, because this is an overcoat. It has to be very flowy, especially if the cosplayer wants to do photos and they want to do like spins or like fighting stances. It just needs to like flow right. Now, if I was working on probably like an undershirt, I would use slightly a thicker interfacing, and that way it would have body to it. Uh, Other than that, I usually stick with this type of interfacing. And as I said below, I would put the information down below so you know what I'm using. Uh, this fabric is a polyester, I believe, 100% polyester. So you got to make sure your iron is low. Uh, if you want to use a higher setting, I would recommend a pressing cloth, because if your iron is too hot, when ironing on the interfacing, it could melt the fabric. I've done that a few times before when I just started out cosplaying, and sometimes it still happens to me. Most of the time, it depends on like what iron I'm using. So if it's my own iron, I know how hot it gets. But if I'm like traveling and I'm using a hotel iron, you don't know how high the power is on that iron. So one time when I was at a convention, uh, the iron in the hotel room was pretty strong, and I ended up not burning, but melting some of my fabric on one of my costumes. Lucky enough, it was under the arm, so it's not noticeable, and it was an undershirt, so even more, no one's gonna see it. Uh, but yeah, you have to be careful which setting you have your iron on. Uh, Once I've ironed on the interfacing, I made the collar longer than it needed to be, mostly because when you're uh, sewing the end bits, you need a little extra fabric to turn it inside, to reverse the fabric and to sew it down. But once I had the interfacing sewn on to the collar, I will go back and trim the edges because the interfacing is cut out to the length I actually need, uh, and to the white width as well. Because certain fabrics will stretch. This is why you want to, like, if you know it might warp, you want to drape it on something and let it drape for a few days to get the warping out. This fabric warped a little bit, but not too horribly. It mostly happened during the embroidering process, and when I was working on the collar a lot. Uh, my green iron is falling apart. Uh, the steam button keeps popping off. I recently just got a new iron, and I keep forgetting to use my new iron because I'm not used to it and didn't want to use my new iron on a commission. I'm using it more now on personal projects so I can get used to it. and hopefully you'll see it in the future, in future videos. But yeah, my Steam button keeps popping off on my green one, which is kind of sad because I really love this iron. Um, but sadly, I use the Steam button a lot. Once the interfacing is ironed onto the collar, I sew the two ends of the collar together, um, giving myself a little bit of longer seam so that it will lay flat when I fold it over, and then I sewed it to the overcoat. I sometimes don't use pins when I'm sewing the collar onto Hanfu overcoats because I need to ease around the neckline because the neckline is such a rounded square that sometimes you have to like go slow and like ease the fabric to the collar. This can be sometimes tricky for people. I find it easier without using pins. The only time I use a pin is to make sure I'm centering the collar to the back of the overcoat. And, you know, simple, easy. I usually get this done in like a few moments, and then I check to make sure I've sewn it correctly. And I usually start from the middle and do one side, and then I'll go and do the middle and the other side. Mostly because I'm wanting to make sure it stays centered at the back. I guess that's my OCD kicking in. But I always like to be very centered at the back with collars. Here, I am using my clear ruler to hem the sleeves, and then I will also use to hem the bottom of the overcoat. But it's more important for me to use it for the sleeves because I like to be precise, especially around the sleeves, especially with it being such a big, wide hem. And I want to make sure it looks good because that's like the majority of what you're going to see in photos is sleeves and collars. You don't see hems very much unless you're doing full body images. Most of the time, I don't like seeing the full outfit because depends on the shoes I'm wearing. I'm sometimes wearing shoes I don't like wearing for my costumes, mostly because comfort. After a while, your feet hurt and you want to slip on sandals. I think this is kind of the easiest part of this costume was just the hemming. Because doing the embroidering was my first time using the embroidering machine, so I had a lot of bumps. And then I had a lot of issues with hand beating because that took a lot of time and my hand would freeze up. But I did this hemming to both sleeves, and I think I gave myself like a 2-inch, no, maybe a 3-inch hem width. I can't remember exactly. But I had to make sure I lay out the fabric correctly. And then here I am just cutting off the extra threads from the back and the front embroidering bits of this overcoat. I do not have the collar folded. I needed the collar to give me enough room for when I was doing the machine embroidering, so I knew where to stop. I'm ironing it again, and then folding it, and then folding the seam allowance down. This can be tricky, especially with such a long collar, that if you're not careful with how you hem it down or iron it down, you can warp the collar again here. now that I've finished folding the collar down and ironing my seam allowance down, I'm going to use, once again, the hidden stitch that I've been using for almost all my hanfu to make sure that you don't see any top stitching. For new beginners, I would recommend going super slow when you're using this type of stitch. But as you get used to using this stitch, it can be just one of those moments where you can go as fast as you want. I still go relatively slow because I just want to make sure I'm only nicking a little bit of the fabric. Around this time, I would be putting music on because with such a long collar, it takes a while. And sometimes if I miss too many stitches, I have to go back and restitch it. Sometimes I can't tell if I missed multiple stitches, so I will stop and take it out and double check. Only happens a few times, but I use this stitch on the collars, the sleeves, and the hemline of the jackets, overshirts, undershirts, even on the skirts I sometimes make. Because I just really don't want a top stitch to be seen on these outfits. And usually this would be probably stitched by hand in ancient times. But we all know we're too lazy to stitch by hand. Unless you're one of those people who prefer stitching by hand. You are amazing. I do not like stitching by hand. So this process can take a bit. Probably a few of you are wondering what is going on with the webbing that's with the leaves of this embroidering work. That is a wash away interfacing, and once I get the collar done and once I've got all the hemming done, I threw the commission into a wash, washed it, and then I hang dried it. Because I didn't want to do a tearaway interfacing because there would have been so many like little pieces of paper fibers that I would have to pick out. So using a wash away interfacing, it's easy. It dissolves in water, and then I just hang the hanfu to dry. It's less hassle, and it's just easier to get a hold of. And I will put down in the description box which wash away interfacing I used, because that would make sense in case people are wondering. Sometimes other people will have a different method of embroidering. So in the next few minutes, you're going to watch me do a lot of beading on this commission. So I'm going to play some music, but on certain leaves, I did beadwork, and then I added extra leaves that would just, instead of embroidering, they were just beads, like a bead design leaf. So I interchanged between working on just the beads in between the embroidering leaves and then doing the whole bead leaf. This alone took a while to complete. I think it took me a whole month or month and a half just to finish all the beadwork on this commission. I'm just gonna play some music and you guys can enjoy watching me bead this hanfu. hope you guys enjoyed the beading process. Like I said, this was the most tasking thing I've ever done for a commission. Uh, it came out wonderful, and I just want to thank my friend in the Netherlands for helping me um, create the image for the leaves for my embroidering machine. Hopefully in the future I can buy my own digitalizer program, uh, so that I don't have to keep asking them for help. And so please enjoy the final product.